This is a background sign from a Simpsons episode that aired in 1998, and this is a real press release Disney put out in 2019. The Simpsons has been on the air since 1989, and it keeps doing this. So today I'm going to show you every Simpsons prediction that actually came true. You've probably seen the screenshot. What you probably haven't heard is what that joke was originally about. The episode is called When You Dish Upon a Star. Season 10 aired November 8th, 1998. Homer stumbles into working as a personal assistant for Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger, and it snowballs the way these things do until he's standing outside a Hollywood studio gate pitching a script. And up on that gate, in the background, there's a sign, 20th Century Fox, a division of Walt Disney Company. It's on screen for about 2 seconds. Nobody mentions it. There's no dialogue, no reaction shot, nothing, which is the entire point. It's a gag planted for the people paying attention. And in 1998, it was a shot at Disney. The joke was that Disney was hoovering up everything in Hollywood and would eventually own its own competition. Fox writers on a Fox show taking a swing at the mouse. That's all it was ever meant to be. Then in December 2017, Disney announced it was buying most of 21st Century Fox. The deal closed on March 20th, 2019 for just over $70 billion. And The Simpsons, the show that made the joke, became a Disney property. 21 years, same wording, same companies, same outcome. The writers put the punchline on a sign and then the punchline bought them. That one's exact. The next one is even more specific, and it came out of the mouth of Milhouse Van Houten. Season 22 opened with an episode called Elementary School Musical, September 26, 2010, and it opens on Lisa sitting up late with Milhouse, Martin, and Database, watching the Nobel Prize announcements live from Stockholm because they have run a betting pool on it, the way normal people run a bracket for the basketball, which is an extremely Lisa Simpson way to spend a Friday night. Everybody picks a name, and Milhouse, who is not the sharpest kid in that school on his best day, picks a Finnish economist called Bengt Holmstrom. That's a real person. In 2010, he was known almost entirely inside academic economics, the kind of name you'd have to work in the field to recognize. It's a joke written for about 9 people on Earth. 6 years later, in 2016, Bengt Holmstrom won the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, shared with Oliver Hart for their work on contract theory. Milhouse called it by name 6 years early, and he'd already done it once. 2 years before that, in 2014, W.E. Morner won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. Milhouse had him on the same card, 2 for 2. Now the writers weren't throwing darts at a wall here. Holmstrom was already respected in his field and a genuinely plausible future winner, so somebody in that room knew exactly whose name they were putting in Milhouse's mouth. That's not a psychic guess, that's a very smart person showing off. But they still had to pick one economist out of the entire planet, and they got it right. That's a name on a slip of paper. The next one put people in handcuffs. March 30th, 2014, Season 25, an episode called You Don't Have to Live Like a Referee. Homer gets recruited to referee at the World Cup, and the reason he gets the job is that he's the only official the organization can find who won't take a bribe. That's the setup. The World Football Federation in this episode is rotten from top to bottom, and at one point, an executive gets arrested on camera in the middle of the story. 14 months later, on May 27, 2015, Swiss police walked into a 5-star hotel in Zurich at 6 in the morning and started arresting FIFA officials. 7 of them. American prosecutors had charged them with racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. 14 people in total, and the whole thing was so sensitive that hotel staff walked them out from behind bedsheets held up to block the cameras. Bedsheets in a 5-star hotel. That's an image The Simpsons would have been proud to write. Now, football corruption was hardly a secret in 2014. People had been shouting about it for years, and the writers were satirizing something the whole world already suspected. What they got right was the ending. An executive of the biggest sporting body on the planet being led away in cuffs at a time when that still felt like a cartoon idea. 14 months from gag to arrest. That one made the news. This next one made a product you can actually go out and buy. Back to season 3 now, and the episode where Homer's half-brother turns up with nothing. Brother, can you spare 2 dimes? August 27th, 1992. Herb Powell lost everything when his car company collapsed. He's living in a shelter, and he comes to Homer asking for money to build one last invention. And what he builds is a machine that listens to a baby crying and tells you what the baby actually wants. He tests it on Maggie. It works. 6 years later, in 1998, a Spanish engineer named Pedro Monagas released a device called Y-Cry. Small handheld thing, you set it near the baby, and it sorts the cry into categories: hungry, uncomfortable, bored, sleepy. And from the reporting on it at the time, Monagas hadn't seen the episode. It doesn't do full sentences the way Herb's box does. It narrows down the likely reason and shows you a little face. But that's a real product, on real shelves, doing the exact job a cartoon invented 6 years earlier. And there are AI versions of the same idea still launching today. The joke was that Herb's genius had nowhere left to go. 6 years later, somebody in Spain had the identical idea and took it to market. That's an invention. This next one is a crime. Season 10 opened with L'Art of the Dance, August 23, 1998, and it gave us Homer's worst business idea of the entire decade, which is a competitive field. Apu tells him used cooking grease is worth money, so Homer pulls Bart out of school, fries up $27 worth of bacon at home, collects 4 pounds of grease, hauls it down to the rendering plant, and comes away with 63 cents. So he escalates. He drags Bart around Springfield with a hose and a drum, siphoning fryer grease out of the back of Krusty Burger, and gets muscled off it by the guys who already run the grease racket in town. Then he goes after the school kitchen and ends up in a full fight with groundskeeper Willie, who's been saving that grease for his retirement. Then biodiesel happened. Once fuel prices climbed and used cooking oil became a feedstock, that stuff went from restaurant waste to something genuinely worth stealing. Organized grease theft became a real problem across the United States. Restaurants started padlocking their bins. Rendering companies started running their own investigators. People have been arrested over stolen fryer oil. The writers didn't invent this out of nowhere, by the way. The story goes that the idea came from a magazine piece about grease already having some value. What they got right was the direction it was heading, that this pathetic little nothing job would turn into something worth doing properly and illegally. Homer got 63 cents for 4 pounds of it. 20 years later, somebody was pulling up to do the same job in a tanker. That's a crime you'd laugh at. Nobody laughed at this next one. Treehouse of Horror 19, November 2nd, 2008, 2 days before the presidential election. Homer goes to vote. He gets in the booth, presses Barack Obama, and the machine registers a vote for John McCain.
1 vote for McCain. Thank you.
No, I want to vote for Obama.
2 votes for McCain.
So he tries again, McCain, again, McCain. 6 attempts, including one where he deliberately picks McCain hoping it'll flip the other way, and it doesn't. Then he goes to report it, and because this is a treehouse of horror, the machine swallows him whole and spits his body back out. Jasper walks over and sticks an "I voted" sticker on his forehead. 4 years later, in 2012, a man in Pennsylvania filmed himself trying to vote on a touchscreen machine. He pressed Obama. The screen lit up Romney. He pressed it again, same result, and he kept filming while it happened. The video went everywhere, and the machine was pulled out of service that day. The user experience is nearly identical. Same jabbing at the same corner of the screen, same wrong answer coming back. The real machine had a calibration fault, and it was removed from the polling place as soon as it was reported, so there's no grand conspiracy in it. And electronic voting had been argued about for years before that episode aired, so the writers were poking at something already in the air. What they nailed was the feeling of it, that very specific frustration of pressing a button and watching a screen tell you no. They got there 4 years early, in the cold open of a Halloween episode, before the Transformers parody had even started. That one's uncomfortable. This next one is the most fun story on the entire list. Homer Palooza, Season 7, May 19, 1996. Homer joins a traveling rock festival as a freak show act after discovering he can take a cannonball to the stomach. And there's a moment backstage where somebody announces that the London Symphony Orchestra has arrived and asks who ordered them. It gets suggested that Cypress Hill booked them while, let's say, not fully sober. Cypress Hill go, "Yeah, alright," and the orchestra backs them on Insane in the Brain. It's a 10-second gag. That's it. On July 10th, 2024, Cypress Hill performed with the London Symphony Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall in London, 28 years after the joke. And this one sits in a category of its own, because the joke is what caused the concert. Fans had been asking about it for decades. The idea kept circulating online, and eventually the band and the orchestra just went ahead and did it on purpose. A cartoon wrote a throwaway line in 1996, and the real world spent 28 years deciding to make it true at the Royal Albert Hall, in front of a paying audience. That's the happiest story on this list. This next one goes the other way. Season 5, December 16th, 1993. The episode called $sign Springfield, where Mr. Burns opens a casino. The casino brings in a magic act. Gunther and Ernst, 2 German illusionists with bleached hair and a white tiger, which is about the thinnest parody of Siegfried and Roy anyone has ever attempted. Their tiger is called Anastasia, and halfway through the act, she starts remembering her old life in the jungle and the day she was shot with a tranquilizer dart and taken away, and she snaps and attacks them. It's played as a joke. She tears the pair of them to shreds, and the episode moves straight on to Bart at a slot machine. Almost 10 years later, on October 3rd, 2003, Roy Horn was attacked by a white tiger on stage at the Mirage in Las Vegas. Full house, mid-performance, on his 59th birthday. He survived, but the injuries were severe. The show had been running at the Mirage since 1990, and it closed that night after 13 years and never reopened. The pair came back to a stage exactly exactly once, for a single farewell performance in 2009. Now, a big cat turning on its handler was always a real occupational risk, and that's precisely why the joke worked in 1993. Everyone understood the danger, which is what made it funny to ignore it. The uncomfortable part is how tightly the details line up. Two men, one white tiger, a Las Vegas stage, and an animal that had spent years being made to perform. The Simpsons wrote it as a gag about exploiting an animal, and 10 years later, it stopped being a gag. And if that one's uncomfortable, this next one is the strangest single episode in the show's history, because it came true twice, 33 years apart. 2 cars in every garage and 3 eyes on every fish. Season 2, November 1st, 1990. Bart's fishing in the river downstream from the nuclear plant and pulls out a fish with 3 eyes, Blinky. It turns into a scandal. The plant gets threatened with closure, so Mr. Burns runs for governor to save it. And his big campaign move is to sit down for dinner at the Simpsons house, in front of the press, and eat the 3-eyed fish himself. Prove there's nothing wrong with it. Marge serves him Blinky on a plate. Burns gets it into his mouth and he can't do it. He spits it out on camera and loses the election that night. That's the episode. Now here's both of the times it landed. In 2011, fishermen in Argentina reported catching a 3-eyed wolf fish in a reservoir. The reservoir takes warm water from a nearby nuclear plant. The photo went around the world because it looks exactly like Blinky, right down to the placement of the 3rd eye. To be completely clear, nobody ever established that radiation caused it. There was no scientific investigation linking that fish to that plant, and 3-eyed fish do turn up as natural mutations. What's uncanny is the picture and the location sitting next to each other. And then 12 years after that, in August 2023, Japan began releasing treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant into the sea. China banned Japanese seafood in response. So the Japanese Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, sat down with some of his ministers in front of the cameras and ate a plate of fish caught off Fukushima to prove there was nothing wrong with it. Same move, same reason, same cameras. The one difference is the important one. Kishida swallowed it. Burns couldn't. One episode from 1990, 2 separate real-world events, 33 years apart. That's the show at its strangest. This next one is the show at its most famous. Bart to the Future. Season 11, March 19th, 2000. Bart gets shown his own future and it's bleak. He's a broke musician living with Ralph Wiggum, and his sister has become president of the United States. And in her first cabinet meeting, President Lisa Simpson says one line.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
That's all of it. One line. No Trump on screen, no plot about him, no build-up, just a name dropped into a list of problems Lisa has to deal with. 16 years later, in November 2016, Donald Trump won the presidential election. He was sworn in as the 45th president in January 2017 and sworn in again as the 47th in January 2025. The week after that 2016 election, the chalkboard gag at the top of the episode read, "Being right sucks." Now the writers weren't guessing blind here either. Trump had publicly circled the idea of running before, including an exploratory run for the Reform Party nomination around 1999, so the name was already floating around in that conversation. Dan Graney, who wrote the episode, has said it was meant as a warning, a picture of America at rock bottom that Lisa then has to clean up. And one more thing, because this comes up in the comments every single time, that clip you've seen of Trump riding down a golden escalator in Simpsons animation, that is not from the 2000 episode. It's from a separate short the show made in 2015, after he'd already announced. Every viral post that stitches the two together is showing you something that doesn't exist. The joke in 2000 was that a Trump presidency was the single most ridiculous thing Lisa could possibly inherit. That's the one everybody knows. From here down, the matches get looser, and honestly, a lot weirder. Lisa Goes Gaga, Season 23, May 20th, 2012. Lady Gaga rolls into Springfield on her own personal train to cheer Lisa up, because that is the level at which this show solves problems. And for the big performance, she goes up on wires above the crowd in a metallic outfit, singing while suspended over everybody's heads. February 2017, Super Bowl 51 halftime show in Houston. Lady Gaga starts on the roof of the stadium, then comes down on wires into the middle of the field in a silver metallic outfit in front of 100 million people. Split screen those two, and it's close enough to be genuinely uncomfortable. This one has an easy explanation though, and it's Gaga herself. She'd been doing exactly this kind of theatrical, harnessed, up-in-the-air performance for years before 2012. The show was drawing what she already did, and then 5 years later she did it at the biggest gig on earth. Good match. Modest Miracle. That one's a lookalike. This next one is a joke that completely reversed on itself. You Only Move Twice. Season 8, November 3rd, 1996. Homer goes to work for Hank Scorpio, who is simultaneously the best boss in television history and a supervillain. Scorpio wants to give Homer a gift, so he asks what he'd like. Homer says the Dallas Cowboys. Scorpio can't get the Cowboys, so instead he gives him the Denver Broncos. And the last shot of the episode is Homer staring at his new team on the front lawn, absolutely gutted. And in 1996, that's a brilliant joke. The Cowboys had won the Super Bowl in January that year, their third in 4 seasons. They were the biggest thing in the sport. The Broncos, meanwhile, had been to 4 Super Bowls and lost all 4 of them. Being handed the Broncos was a punishment. 14 months later, in January 1998, Denver won the Super Bowl. Then they won it again the following year. Then they won it again in 2016. And Dallas? Dallas hasn't been back to a conference championship game since the 1995 season. The episode never once suggests Denver are going to win anything, and that's exactly what makes it good. The gag simply aged into the opposite of what it meant, and Homer walked away with the better prize by a mile. That's a reversal. This next one is just petty. Lemon of Troy, Season 6, May 14th, 1995. Springfield has a lemon tree. It's ancient. It's the pride of the whole town. Generations of kids have sat in it, and one night a gang of kids from Shelbyville come across the town line, dig the entire tree out of the ground, and haul it home with them. It escalates into a full war. Bart leads a rescue mission. There's a Winnebago involved. And then in real life, people started stealing lemon trees. Mature citrus trees turn out to be worth a decent amount of money, and there have been cases of homeowners walking outside in the morning to find a hole in the ground where their tree used to be, including one reported in the Houston area in 2013. This one's small. It was never going to make it past a local news bulletin, but a cartoon in 1995 invented a crime that oddly specific, and then somebody went out and committed it. Small and petty. This next one is one episode that hit 4 separate times. Lisa's Wedding, Season 6, March 19th, 1995. The first time the show ever jumped forward in time, and it set the whole story in the impossibly distant future year of 2010, which means everything in the background of this episode is the 1995 writer's room guessing what 15 years ahead looks like, and they got a whole run of things right inside about 90 seconds of screen time. There are video calls, with people talking to each other on screens like it's the most normal thing in the world. There's a character speaking into a watch on his wrist. There's a robot librarian at the university that goes off and fetches your book for you. There's a London skyline with a tall pointed glass tower standing near Tower Bridge. And there's a poster on a dorm wall advertising the Rolling Stones Steel Wheelchair Tour 2010. Video calls and smartwatches are now just objects that people own and lose. The University of Chicago opened a library in 2011 that uses automated cranes to pull requested books out of underground storage, which is that same robot librarian in industrial form. Construction on the Shard started in 2009 and finished in 2012, sitting near London Bridge. And the Stones never did that specific tour, but they carried on filling stadiums into their 70s and 80s, which was always the actual joke. None of it was invented by The Simpsons. Wrist communicators and picture phones had been in science fiction and tech demos for decades before 1995. And that London Tower is a generic cartoon spike. What the episode got right was the texture of it, what 2010 would feel like to live inside. One episode, 4 hits, and almost all of them sitting in the background. That's the last of the strong ones. What's left is a run of matches that are real, but a lot looser, so let's go through them properly and quickly. Midnight RX 2005. Ned Flanders goes to Manitoba and meets his Canadian counterpart, who cheerfully offers him a referino and mentions it's legal up here. In 2005, it wasn't. Canada legalized recreational cannabis in October 2018. The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace, 1998. Homer's trying to become an inventor, and he fills a blackboard with equations, one of which is a genuine attempt at the mass of the Higgs boson. Writer David X. Cohen, who studied physics at Harvard, phoned an old school friend, an astronomer at Columbia named David Shiminovich, and got him to build it. CERN confirmed the Higgs existed in 2012. Work Homer's equation out, and it gives you 775, where the real answer is 125, so it's out by a factor of 6. The impressive part is that a primetime cartoon in 1998 bothered to put a serious physics estimate on screen at all. Itchy and Scratchy and Marge, 1990. Springfield's parents lose their minds over Michelangelo's David coming to town and demand it be covered up. In 2023, a Florida school principal resigned after parents complained about a Renaissance art lesson featuring the same statue. One parent described it as pornographic. Boy Meets Curl, 2010. Homer and Marge win Olympic curling gold for the United States. In 2018, the American men's team, skipped by John Schuster, won the country's first ever Olympic curling gold. Different event, same medal, 8 years later. Sweet Seymour Skinner's Badass Song, 1994. Lunch Lady Doris tips a container marked assorted horse parts into the school lunch. In 2013, the European horse meat scandal found horse DNA in products being sold as beef right across the continent. The War of Art, 2014. A cutaway shows Richard Branson floating in zero gravity, admiring art. On July 11, 2021, Branson flew on Virgin Galactic's VSS Unity and floated in zero gravity. He'd been publicly building towards that since 2004, so the show was really just drawing a man's stated ambition. Please Homer, don't hammer him. 2006. The family walks through a dying mall past a dead JCPenney. JCPenney filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in May 2020. The Simpsons movie 2007. Marge says nobody's listening, and the film cuts to an enormous NSA room stacked with people listening to private conversations. 6 years later, Edward Snowden's disclosures showed exactly how big those programs were. How I Spent My Strummer Vacation 2002. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards hand Homer a jacket with Guitar Hero written across the back. The game launched in 2005 and turned that phrase into a franchise. Bart Carney 1998. Bart wants to play an arcade game called Yard Work Simulator instead of doing actual yard work. 10 years later, millions of people were harvesting imaginary crops on Facebook while their real garden sat there. And then there's Tomako, E-I-E-I Annoyed Grunt 1999. Homer accidentally grows a tomato and tobacco hybrid and tries to sell it. In 2003, a fan in Oregon named Rob Bohr grafted a tomato plant onto tobacco roots and grew a real one, then sent photographs to the show, which is what happens when a guy with a greenhouse decides a cartoon ought to be true. That's everything on the list that came true. There's one more I want to show you, and it's the one that genuinely unsettles me. All the show did was air on a Sunday. Monty Burns' Fleeing Circus, the season 28 premiere, September 25th, 2016. There's a bit in it where Homer's loading a super soaker with lemonade while Carl fills his with iced tea because they're going to Arnold Palmer Lenny. Marge asks what on earth he's on about, and Homer explains that Arnold Palmer was a golfer who invented a drink that's half iced tea and half lemonade. Arnold Palmer died on September 25th, 2016 at 87 years old. The same day, the episode aired that night, and there's no version of this where the show knew. Animation takes months. That episode was written, recorded, drawn, and locked long before anybody had any idea Arnold Palmer was going to die, and the air date had been fixed for weeks. It's a coincidence, full stop, with nothing behind it. It's also the single strangest thing in this whole video, and it's exactly why I saved it until now, because at some point you have to ask the obvious question: how does one cartoon keep doing this? And the answer is the least magical thing you'll hear all day. The Simpsons has been running since 1989, 37 seasons. It passed 800 episodes in December 2025, every one of them written by a room of 10 to 20 people, a load of them Harvard graduates, with mathematicians and physicists sitting in there too, whose entire job is to look at the world and make jokes about where it's heading. Al Jean ran the show from 2001 until he stepped down in 2025, and he's explained it about as plainly as anyone could. Episodes air roughly a year after they're written, so the writers are permanently thinking a year ahead of everybody watching. That's the trick. That's all of it. Asked about it again at the 800th episode party, he said the predictions are accidental and that they're not from the future. So run that machine for 37 years, tens of thousands of jokes about politics, technology, celebrities, sport, business, money, and disaster, written by people paying closer attention than most journalists. Some of them are going to land. The math says they have to, which takes nothing away from it. Milhouse still picked the right economist. That sign still said Disney. Burns still couldn't swallow the fish 33 years before a prime minister had to. And there's one still in play. The season 19 premiere, He Loves to Fly and He Does, aired September 23rd, 2007, about 2 months after the first Simpsons movie came out. And Bart's chalkboard gag that week read, "I will not wait 20 years to make another movie." A second Simpsons movie has now been announced, and Disney only put the title on a poster this month at D23. It's called The New Simpsons Movie, and it's out on September 3rd, 2027. And here's the part that kills me. When they first announced it, the date was July 23rd, 2027, which is 4 days short of 20 years after the first film. Bart's chalkboard would have landed perfectly. Then Disney shifted it to September to get out of the way of a Minecraft sequel, which means the joke now misses by about 5 weeks. 37 years of accidentally getting things right, and the one prediction they ever made about themselves gets broken by a release schedule. Release dates move, the film isn't out, and nobody gets to call it either way yet. But that is very on brand. Alright, your turn. Drop it in the comments. Which one did I leave out that you'd have put in the top 3? And listen, I've got exactly one goal for this channel this year: 100,000 subscribers before it's out. That's the whole target. This channel does one thing and one thing only: the entire show taken apart one rabbit hole at a time. And if you want that turning up in your feed pretty much every day, hitting subscribe is how you make it happen. Let's get to 100K together.